Welcome to Bisnow's Student Housing Digital Summit, a tradition unlike any other. Today, we have incredible content across multiple platforms, socially distant networking. It's everything you love about our live events, minus the morning traffic jams and the occasional soggy breakfast burrito. I have a decent amount of housekeeping notes today, so please bear with me. We have 4 sessions today, so be sure to tune in to as many as possible. You can also star the panels that you're interested in, and you'll receive a notification when that panel is starting. A few tips and tricks to help you while I have you here. First thing, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and create a profile for yourself. At the top right corner, you'll see your name. Click on that. You can upload a picture. You can add a description of yourself. This will enhance everybody's experience. Unlike some other event companies out there, our panels are live. As such, I encourage you to avoid clicking out of these sections, as you'll lose some valuable insight. Throughout the event, you'll be able to interact with attendees via the right-hand chat section. I hope I'm pointing to the right side. You can also ask questions as the conversation moves along. There are polls in the poll section for each panel. Please go in there and answer these polls as truthfully as possible. They will help guide the discussion today. If you experience any technical difficulties, please use the information desk and FAQ tab in the middle of the lobby page to troubleshoot, or give us a shout in the chat section. A Bisnow team member will be standing by ready to help. It's fine if you're watching from your phone, by the way, but the best way to view this is a laptop or a desktop. So get to a safe space, turn on your computer and watch us there. The Expo Hall is a great place to visit and network with the sponsors of the event. Please explore there between the sessions or the lunch break. To join, go to the Expo floor section on the left-hand side. Say thank you for helping put on the event today. For speed networking at 1 o'clock and at 2:50, you will need to enable your camera plus your microphone in order to truly take advantage of the meeting. We are all Zoomers now, so this should be second nature to most of us, but don't forget to press connect and send over your virtual business card, follow up with a formal meeting. We're all here to do more business, and hey, if you can get more business out of this event, I will be very happy. Now, before we get into our first panel, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the summit. Today, I would like to recognize GMH Associates, Evolution Energy Partners, WDG Architecture. Also, huge shout out to Lisa for all your help behind the scenes to put these great panels together. The American Institute of Steel Construction, AMA Financial, BSB Design, DMG Investments, the Scion Group, and Aptitude Development. Please, a virtual round of applause for all of our sponsors, and thank you for helping put on this phenomenal event. What do you say? That's a lot. That's enough out of me. I would love to turn it over to our moderator, Angel Rivera, with an SVP with Servitas. Please take it away. I'm going to jump off screen and really enjoy this session.
Good morning, everybody. We have 40 minutes left, so we're going to move at an efficient pace. We will start by having each of the members of our panel introduce themselves. We have an excellent and diverse group of individuals here. My name is Angel Rivera. I'm Senior VP at Servitas. Effectively, my firm develops student housing on campuses across the country. We manage it too, and I lead our development efforts. Dominique, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Dominique Casimir. I am the Enterprise Vice President for Thomas Jefferson University and Hospital System. We have 2 major campuses, and I run the whole entire real estate division for that.
Jason?
Good morning. Jason Taylor, Vice President of Public-Private Partnerships at American Campus Communities. ACC is the largest owner, operator, and developer of student housing in the U.S.
Jeffrey?
Good morning. I'm Jeff Amengual. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DMG Investments, taking the lead on our enterprise Auden Living, which is our student housing off-campus program.
Ray?
Good morning, Ray Tennyson with the Scion Group. Scion Advisory Services provides a full suite of campus housing, consulting and advisory services from market demand studies all the way through operations consulting. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
And Jared? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Jared Hutter, co-founder and principal of Aptitude Development. We're about a 6.5-year-old company focused on student housing nationwide.
And the first question today is, we're at peak number of COVID cases nationally, went up 39.9% over the last week. Some campuses are doing a fairly good job, I think, of making the campuses a pretty safe, healthy place. Some are not being as successful. and students are going home now for Thanksgiving and probably staying home for the holidays. We'll see a new wave when kids go home for Thanksgiving. And the second part to that is there anything we can really do to reduce socialization on campuses? Can it be stopped? Whoever wants to start, for free.
So I'll jump in since Thomas Jefferson University, we're one of 2 campuses that have remained open throughout this whole entire period in Philadelphia. And we've also remained the lowest amount of COVID positive cases during this whole entire time. We also have a full body student population on campus. One of the things that we've done, and I think we've seen a great response from students, is really prep students prior to coming on campus, all the different protocols of what's expected, how the changes would result in regards to the lifestyle that they were used to, in regards to how they need to adjust their lifestyle in order for it to work. We've modified our experiences so that there's less people convening, obviously, in person. But I think what we found to be much more effective was that students were willing to comply because of the experience of still being able to interact in a certain capacity. And so we've seen people make the modifications necessary in order to protect themselves and others. And prior to going home for the holiday, we've even had a session, not just for our students, but for our parents as well, to educate the process in regards to safeguards, keeping, how to quarantine at home with family members to ensure safety measures, where testing can be provided, and also how to quarantine when coming back. Thomas Jefferson University, we've made the decision that we are going to onboard students for the spring semester and take on the same guidelines that we did this past fall in regards to our scrutiny, testing, and onboarding system. And we found that to be effective. So I think having a clear plan, understanding what that plan is prior to onboarding on campus, and making sure that everybody understands the ramifications if it's not adhered to, are key principles so that everybody really understands the benefits of it.
Well, I can't echo enough Dominique's last statement in particular about being clear and direct with students about what the expectations are. We actually just last week closed our fall 2020 report card, which is our survey of the 130,000 students who live with us. We had about 43,000 students who responded, and I was able to pull a little bit of that data that I'll preview for those who happen to be attending Bisnow this morning. But with regard to COVID, we obviously asked a number of questions. And I think they all really support what Thomas Jefferson and Dominique have done and what other institutions are trying to do. So, for example, we asked students if they were actually following various guidelines. 96% of students agreed or strongly agreed that they were following the guidelines either on our on-campus facilities or, in our residential facilities or on their campuses. 94% agreed that they're wearing a mask inside always or most of the time. 92% said that they're keeping 6 feet of physical distance always or most of the time. And I thought one of the most interesting statistics was outcomes of the survey was we asked students to describe their university's response. So how would they characterize their university's guidelines? 85% believed that the university's guidelines were effective or adequate, and 6% believed that they were extreme. We could take that negatively, but I actually take that positively to say that 91% of students believe that the institution is doing enough or more than enough. Only 7% of respondents believe that it was insufficient.
So I
I think whether
go ahead, Ray.
So whether you're an institution, you're on campus, whether you're a private operator that's a partner to an institution, or you're a private in the off-campus market, what's clear, I think, is that students want this experience. And as long as the educational component is there, again, regardless what your role is, and you're setting clear boundaries, you're setting a clear educational campaign ahead of time and not taking for granted that students residing with us even know this information. There's been so much that has changed over time. There's been so much that's been sensationalized and politicized. So we've found great success in pointing out examples where there's clear campaigns, there's clear messaging, there's not just consequences demonstrated. I think we saw early on in August when there were big parties and some institutions were expelling large numbers of students, but rather to educate and treat students as adults time and time. That wins out. They will conform their behavior, and ultimately that means success for the operators of student housing.
So I was going to say, I think what Thomas Jefferson's doing really seems to be the gold standard of what's out there, and they're clearly doing a great job. There's obviously been a number of universities that have had larger outbreaks and shut down. There's been universities that have been able to manage all this, and then as the outbreaks have come, and then there are universities who haven't handled this also well. But when you think about where is this all headed, right? Let's assume a vaccine is coming. The news obviously has been fairly positive there, but what we're all holding our breath on is, are students coming back in the spring, or or late winter, what we call the spring? So are they coming back? When I was thinking about this, last night and this morning, I think we're all in a good spot because we've weathered what might be the worst part of the storm. Doesn't mean the next month, 2 months aren't going to be bumpy from a COVID perspective. But when you think about students, the most places they're going to congregate are probably while they're at campus. When you're going home, my opinion is there's a better chance you're going to follow more social distancing guidelines. You're around less people. So I think you're going to see a lot less infections coming back to campus. Whether it spikes at that point when people come back, I think you're all guessing and holding our breath. But for the most part, I actually feel very optimistic about the ability of all these universities to weather the storm over the next 2 months, give information to kids, prepare them for this, and welcome them back for the spring semester.
One of the things that's happening is we're sort of learning as we go. I think there was a great deal of concern that students would abandon their universities and colleges at the onset of COVID. We found just the opposite, that a number of students decided to come back to campus, even though classes weren't being held across the board in all areas. And the reasoning behind that was that they wanted to, in part, protect their families from transmission of COVID. They wanted to have the college experience. They wanted to be able to, meet with their friends and communicate better with teachers and educators. Also to make themselves available in case labs opened, and other activities opened. So there was a great push at the beginning of the fall semester for students to come back, and the rates of inhabitants at the universities seem to be increasing as opposed to the other direction that we were concerned about. Going into the holiday period, the vacation period, as it were, we don't know what's going to happen relative to the amount of COVID infections that may escalate in all likelihood throughout the community. Universities are just a small piece of those communities overall. So we have to sort of watch, monitor, guide ourselves accordingly. Hopefully, best practices ensue and students come back in better condition than before and are ready to take their place back at universities. And that really should lead us into a solid spring and then the following year. And hopefully with COVID as a virus somewhat behind us, which I think is everyone's hope, is to get that behind us.
I was just going to add to Jeff and Jared's point, my greatest concern is for students going home during the holiday season, because I think, believe it or not, there's more restrictions on campus than at home. And I think it's harder to mandate people interacting with their family members and gatherings during the holiday season. So I think it'll be a very interesting telling story to see how that actually portrays, because there's no restrictions at home per se, and a lot more family interaction. So it'll be very interesting to see what the spring will hold for us.
Fingers crossed.
We're all hoping for good news on that topic, and I remind the audience that we welcome audience questions. I am going to try to keep the topics evolving so we can get to the gamut of things we're going to talk about today. One of the big impacts of COVID has been on enrollment, and the enrollment impact has not been identical across the board by any means. And we've also seen how, if you get to the data, specifically, we've seen an increase in grad student enrollment, for example, at many four-year research institutions. We've seen a sharp decline of enrollment at community colleges. We're seeing private schools on average with a small enrollment decline, and even more traditional state schools, four-year schools, are having also similar situation. So we're seeing a very varied enrollment picture, mostly negative or oblique. How do you panel members see the long-term impact? Everybody, this year was not good, right? So we don't need to review that for everybody. If you can read the paper, you know that. But what is the long-term impact at different institutions? What is the long-term impact for small institutions? Are we seeing a move towards commuting and or online schooling that will have a particular impact on student housing that we should discuss here? Big question.
Yes.
I would say in terms of enrollment, obviously those who are struggling already, this has further exacerbated the challenge even more so. And we've seen the reports and the studies of who may not be viable and who may not make it out of the financial strain caused by the pandemic and everything else. I think it's interesting to look at a student perspective though, how they see their experience and the price tag for virtual education. And how that will play out over the longer term. And it might be why we see some trends, Angel, that you described in who is making it successful, either cost of attendance or the value of enrolling now or continuing and persisting with an institution is clear to a student. So I think those things are obvious. Longer term, though, those who are also struggling, I imagine university housing facilities reserves budgets are tapped. So therefore, some funds are depleted that would otherwise be put towards capital improvements, smaller renovations, perhaps new construction, all things that create an environment that's attractive to students enrolling for the first time or persisting and living on campus or being part of the campus community, further exacerbating the financial issues.
One of the things I think we're looking forward to is in the future, greater use of bed bath parity. You know, students who have the ability to have their own bedroom and bathroom in a smaller size unit, where maybe it's a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit, certainly going to fare better than accumulating in larger dorms. So off-campus facilities or even on-campus facilities that can provide those will probably do extremely well, tied to those universities who are going to maintain their populations and potentially even grow their populations. So, you know, we're very excited that the future is going to be stronger in the, you know, student housing market space because of that dynamic in and of itself.
I just want to say, I think Ray touched on it in regards to the value, that this is where a lot of colleges and universities are really going to have to define what value that they're providing to students, whether it be on campus or remotely. And I think that this is a time where a lot of universities and higher education institutions have to reinvent themselves in regards to defining the experience, because what we're learning from all of this is that our experiences are changing, that we have to keep pace with technology and interactions and create community in a different sense, in a different way. And online with that branding, we've been able to maintain our enrollment, and we've even seen an increase in enrollment in our nursing school. So it'll be very interesting to see how things change or shift. So I think it's about creating community. To Jeff's point in regards to student housing shifting, one of the things that we're finding is this year, we had everybody isolated in their own dorms. That is one of the reasons why I think we've kept our numbers down so much. But one of the things that we've seen a demand or request for is for people to come back together. And so what we're finding is, though, even though we're requesting everybody be separated, we're seeing a huge need or request for people to still be together. And some of the things that we're seeing are people opting to go off campus and room together. So I still sense that there's going to still be a desire for community, whether we're calling it student housing or different type of housing. There's definitely, I don't see this going away. Speaking as a mother of a child that is in college, she'd rather not stay with me or by herself in a room. She'd rather stay, like right now, she's negotiating with me how she can rent an apartment with her friends. And so it's very interesting. Like student housing in the traditional sense may change, but community and housing together, I don't see that changing for this age group anytime soon.
So we're predicting, try to summarize conclusions so we can then keep honing in different details. We're predicting absolutely continual demand to live on or near campus. So that the physical class experience still remaining primary component of a complete higher education experience. Dominic sees a return to the more communal living that has been the standard for a very long time. Jeffrey sees an increasing movement towards bedroom bath parity. He isn't necessarily saying 1-bedroom units. It might be 4-bedroom, 4-bath, but where each resident gets their own bathroom. Jared, you wanna come in? And really, my question is, 4 years from now, right? COVID has hopefully been eradicated or controlled. Does student housing look like it looked in the fall of 2019? Or are we managing or developing a different product type?
So on our side, we're trying to understand sort of where the trends are headed and do our best to adapt to that. So Jeff, you made a point, you think there's going to be smaller units to really get more bed bath parity. We absolutely agree on the bed bath parity aspect of it. I think it's would be a little reckless on our part from our developments to try and not do pretty much entirely bed bath parity movement. I think everyone's doing that. We're not special on that one. But where I would disagree, Jeff, I think what we're trying to do, at least, we're trying to make our units bigger than we have been. I think for years there's been a compression in unit sizes that people are looking. You are selling that bed, you are selling that bath, and it doesn't matter what the living room looks like, and you're expanding your community spaces throughout. The buildings that we're designing right now, we're trying to make those units themselves bigger. The bedroom and bathroom, maybe not so much, but even in a 2 or 4 bedroom unit, have some bigger living spaces there, as opposed to compressing it, knowing that I think one of the long-term trends will be people spending a little bit more time inside their units. The other thing we're trying to do, because I absolutely agree on the sense of community aspect, but the question is, how do you do that in a safe and cautious manner? So the 3 or 4 developments that we're early design phase right now, one of the things we're looking at doing is trying to break up the amenity spaces throughout, as opposed to having everything in one general area of the building. Break it up. You can have your gym and your lounge in one section. You can have multiple pool areas, multiple outdoor areas. But everything we're looking at right now is sort of breaking it up. It's still the same amount or greater of amenity space, but it's programmed differently to really try and take advantage of what the trend coming out of this is. And the truth is, from our perspective, I don't think there's any downside, because worst case scenario, this is all gone, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, everyone goes back to normal. Okay, so our spaces are spread out a little bit more. I think we're just trying to program better and give a better experience overall. The only other thing I would add there, Dominic, you talk about the experience. We talk about that on our side all the time. And when we look for universities to go invest, to go develop that, we think about the value proposition of education. And that to us is something that we're hyper focused on, picking universities where the value proposition of the education, it's obviously not just tuition for credit, it's the overall experience that people get. And we're looking at that because we look at ourselves and we say, we play on the off-campus side a very small role of the overall student experience that is dominated by the university, and that's shouldn't and won't change. The question is, how do we complement that experience on the off-campus side? And then from an investment side, focus on universities where that value proposition is very, very high.
I think Jared's point is perfect to understanding Gen Z as well. Gen Z values education, but not just for the experience, but an outcome. They saw brothers and sisters go through college, come out with a degree, a whole lot of student debt, and perhaps not a job to follow immediately after, and they returned home. So we see Gen Z being a bit more pragmatic, a bit more mindful on value and what the experience will lead to in the future. Even furthermore, stating the obvious, their connectivity, but also Gen Z's focus on wellness holistically. I think that has big implications in design and certainly community space as well, on campus and off campus. And here's the thing, speaking from on campus specifically, there's been study after study after study that has shown a student's connection to the campus, a student living on campus, a student having a faculty mentor relationship, whatever it might be, all these things that can be animated in on-campus housing contribute to persistence and success. So whether the design is slightly different or whether the strategy might be different, the outcome is still strong. And I think that will call all of us to be mindful of that and continue to be creative to meet those institutional goals for on-campus housing as well.
So Jason, I would love to hear your thoughts on all this, and I guess I'll add a follow-up to that, which is, will retail and place-making spaces still play a part in all this? And is ACC also seeing an enlarging of units? Because that creates, of course, a competition against maintaining project costs and performance and all those things we try to do to make a living.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm struck listening to the conversation that the singular theme seems to me to be that the pandemic is not the change agent. It is the accelerant of the changes that were already happening. The focus of Gen Z on value and on whether and how they will take on debt for their education was a central focus of our industry 12 months ago. The idea that students are looking to aptitudes, great credit, that students are looking for not the big resort style pool, but rather smaller, more closer to their front door, if you will, and more broken up community spaces is a conversation we were having with colleges and universities in particular, but also off campus a year ago. These all seem to me to be issues that have been accelerated by the pandemic, but certainly not that are caused by the pandemic. With respect, I think specifically to the idea of retail and placemaking will never not be important. There's a double negative for you. Will never not be important, will always be important. With that said, I do think that it will look different. But again, I go back on how to the idea that we were talking about this 12 months ago. 12 months ago, we were engaged in conversations with colleges and universities around whether they needed to replace their big campus bookstore that no one uses except on the orientation and the prospective student tour with maker spaces, with incubator spaces, with other types of spaces that, to Ray's point about Gen Z, they can actually point to and say, there's value in living in this place will ultimately help me to get a job, will ultimately help me to be the successful entrepreneur that I want to be. So I think that it all goes back to the idea that we, and I know everyone here is doing the same thing, have to take one big step back and say, wait a minute, we're just talking about all the same things that we've been talking about. They just are a little bit more existential now.
Jason, I think you nailed the point, and I just want to hone in on points that you, Ray, and Jared made in regards to the experience per square foot. We've been really focused on the experience per square foot and the placemaking. And since we're a research heavy institution, because we have a hospital system, we've turned a lot of our spaces into exactly that placemaking, innovation spaces, think tank spaces, where we would have these large conference rooms or these large, they're now thinking areas where people can actually develop real items out of them. And so I think that this generation Z is a completely different animal than the Gen X, baby boomers, and even your millennials. They're much more practical. They're much more engaged in a different way, and they don't need all the bells and whistles, I think, because they've been exposed to all the bells and whistles. They want much more intimate experiences that translate into something meaningful. And so I think this is a very interesting time for retail to reinvent itself, to create different floor plates in regards to experiences for campuses. And I think from a design perspective, from the open campuses where there's not so much going on, how do we create more atmospheres where people have a chance to create their own experiences? So to your point, I agree, that's something that we're focused on heavily at TJU.
But Dominic, it's hard to see any food service outlet not insisting on having a pass-through window, for example, right? I mean, these are just.
I mean, I just don't know how you don't have that. But I mean, like, there are certain things that are never going to go away from a retail perspective. And I think that what we've learned with retailers in regards to food specifically is that they've learned how to reinvent themselves during this time. And they've learned how to service people differently. I mean, you can get a cocktail delivered to you in a box now and do a whole recipe. I mean, like, people have been so creative in how they're delivering their experiences to your front door that it'll be very interesting to see how it evolves even more after the pandemic.
And there's broader commentary on that because those who are living with us will expect that of us. Perhaps not the cocktail in the box, or maybe they will, I don't know. But and whether it's appropriate or not is a different debate. But they will expect that out of a level of service from a student housing operator as well, or an on-campus housing residence life department, because that is their mindset. So I think that's an important piece that we'll continue to see evolve or not, and how that will bear out and be successful or not as well.
So I'm hearing maybe smaller amenity spaces, but more of them. Hearing more bedroom bath parity, potentially larger unit sizes. These are all red flags. You're trying to make the numbers work. And of course, the conversation, I think one of the people alluded to this whole movement towards less student debt. Contrary to, I think, the expectations of some, I would not assume a magic wand from the federal government solving the problem for the American people anytime soon. Whether they should or shouldn't is also not the topic of today's conversation. So my question to you is, how do you make the numbers work with more space, more plumbing fixtures, potentially more common area spaces, less retail revenue, and yet somehow say, we're gonna do this students want to borrow less. I'm quite curious. I don't know if it's possible.
So I'll just say this from an institution perspective. Oh, I'm sorry, Jared.
No, I was just gonna say the one thing you have to also add to that conversation is construction costs that have risen, significantly.
Absolutely.
Dominic, go ahead. I'll jump in after.
Sure. I was just going to say, from an institution perspective, I mean, when Jeff was talking about the parity, I was like, well, what endowment fund is that coming out of? I mean, not every institution has a plush endowment fund. And for us, I think this is where we would look at public-private partnerships. We cannot do this all on our own balance sheet and expect the student to just kind of pick up the tab. We have to look at different partnerships than we've ever looked at before in how we're revitalizing our spaces in a practical way without carrying all of the debt completely on our books. And we have to institute partnerships in a different way than we've ever looked at traditionally before from an institution perspective. Jared?
Yeah, so look, the rising construction costs are a huge issue. And I think the other thing that we're encountering across the country now is the less willingness of a lot of these municipalities to work with you from a tax perspective. I mean, I think real estate taxes probably kill more deals than anything else that's out there. And when the city's not stepping up, it makes it that much harder to make any of these numbers work. So how do you get it to work? It's tough. I think the barriers to entry are becoming a little bit higher in this business, which are not the worst thing in the world necessarily. The ACCs and the Signs of the world can probably have, cost of capital that is much lower than most people out there to be able to either go buy or build, some of this product. But from where we sit, we're a very well capitalized company. We've got a great investor base. So how do we make the numbers work? We got to get creative on everything we do, and it's whether it's different affordability throughout the building. Where you offer some premium products and you offer some more affordable. Whether it's less bed bath parity for a couple of the units, whether it's a different level of finish. You try and just get creative throughout. And then at the same time, the other thing, Jeff, you mentioned earlier, it's more 1 and 2 bedroom units for sure. And we're trying to fit that into our developments, and that hurts the numbers as well. Less dense, higher construction costs, and real estate taxes that are rising like crazy. You just got to get creative. And you also have sellers of land out there that all have these crazy expectations of what they think it's worth. So you're not even getting a break there. Not that the land cost necessarily kills the deal, but it doesn't help these days. So you got to get really creative, and there's not one answer. on how you make this stuff work. For us, every project is different. We've got one brand that we're running with, but we're trying to really make every product fit the local market, because students in University A are different than students at University B, for sure. So how do you brand it locally, put in the right amenities for that, but also get, you know, efficiencies throughout a number of developments? It's not easy, but you know, I think everyone gets creative on these deals to make it work.
So it seems we're forging into a brave new world, and perhaps this is a topic for a future seminar, but the construction delivery method clearly has to change. Cost of construction going up and efficiencies are increasing as well. You know, one of the things that we're looking towards is modular housing. We're looking towards improvement in technology on the delivery method. These are all going to be key factors, both on campus and off campus. I agree with you, Dominique, that the public-private partnership is going to be a key factor in developing, you know, exceptional housing on campus. It's a challenge for us also in the off-campus market to produce higher quality product, greater diversity and flexibility, because each market space is slightly different. You know, there are some that are associated with tech centers, some that are associated with athletics. The needs and requirements of those students differ greatly from location to location. And so those are some of the challenges that we have going forward. That's probably a big topic for our next seminar.
You know, in the P3 space, on how we've talked for years about the ability of institutions and yet their reticence over the years to leverage their existing, often unencumbered or very lightly encumbered residential facilities that were built maybe many decades ago to enable revitalization and enable perhaps their housing master plans. I think that certainly in the conversations that we're having with colleges and universities today, in what we're hearing from others who are engaged with institutions today, I think we're going to actually see that begin to happen, that an institution says not only, hey, can you do a P3 for this one building that we really want to do? Maybe it's a replacement or something, but also we recognize that we're asking for more, you know, more square footage. We're asked per student, little less density. We're asking in an environment where construction costs have gotten higher and so forth. We're asking for more ancillary non-revenue space. Can we also include facilities that may need, let's call it not a true renovation, but some light retouching and revitalization? And can we include those revenue streams, because they are in many instances not encumbered? And I believe that as we move forward, we're going to see more of that.
Just going to add a bit to Jared's point and Jason's as well. I think there's a responsibility and an opportunity for all the folks here on the panel, even and industry partners to institutions, to get it right in a couple ways. I don't know that all institutions, in fact, I know that all institutions don't have the same knowledge and sophistication or even acceptance of P3. The amount of P3 101 education that Sign Advisory does is strong to help institutions understand that this can be a viable structure and pathway. The other thing, I think it calls for partners all to be extra diligent, to Jared's point, to understand that institution's student culture, student body, mission, and how this helps achieve that. From early on in the demand study to the architectural partner, to make sure it serves the needs there and it's not a fool's errand along the way there. I'm sitting right now in California out of our Irvine office, and I can't help but think how rampant housing insecurity is here in the state of California. That problem doesn't go away. And in fact, it's probably even further exacerbated right now. So that makes Angel's question even difficult to have everything pencil and still meet every objective. So maybe in some cases it's not bed bath parity, but it's looking at existing issues and sentiment after the pandemic.
So what I'm hearing is we're gonna see further differentiation in price points within communities in order to be able to serve different needs, different populations. We expect to see colleges and universities be more creative in how they not only finance facilities, but potentially pull together different revenue sources in order to be able to adapt the revenue to the revenue needs of these new facilities or upgrading facilities. And some of this, so really I think the conclusion is COVID has accelerated a lot of the concerns and trends we saw before COVID, but also exacerbated a need for privacy that we have seen kind of start in the early 2000s, has seen kind of slow down, and now we're seeing come back again. And I think that's rather good or bad. That is probably the reality we are facing today. And I think to Ray's point, even those trends will still vary campus by campus, because to Dominic's point, both as an administrator, but also as a parent, what she's seeing is that there is still demand, or a big demand, for that communal aspect of student housing that is so critical to differentiating our product from just a multi-family market rate development. And we see that going forward very strongly. So I'm glad to hear it. I think we all conclude student housing has a good future. It's a little different, and some of our fears are realizing, some of our concerns and opportunities are coming together soon. But it sounds like it's a good time to be in our industry if you can adapt to change.
What a great panel to start the day. So just so everybody knows, we're going to transition to our next panel. Actually, I'm happy we touched on P3s just a bit, because our next panel is a case study and a deep dive into a P3 project. So does anybody have any last remarks before we switch over to the next panel? Well, sincerely appreciate it. We have one panel, then world famous speed networking, followed by 2 more panels. Thanks everybody for joining. Dominique, Jason, Ray, Jeff, Jared, and Anil. This was fantastic. I'll see y'all a little bit later.
Thank you.